I miss you all very much. Good evening, everyone, and I'm sorry if you felt abandoned these past few days. And besides the fact that we were lost in airports, going around in circles, unable to reach our destination, we've also moved to a new studio, and that's very exciting because we want to make things better for you, but also for a very, very interesting reason. You know that I always try to stay skeptical, but I want to ask you, do you think it would be special if Relatos de la Noche was recorded from a place where the local police avoid entering, simply out of fear? Do you think a story has even more power if it's told from a haunted place? I'll tell you more. I'll explain this story to you. But for now, it's time to continue this Diciembre de Terror. And you're already listening to Relatos de la Noche. Hello to Uriel and to the whole community. My name is Gerardo, and I've been listening to the stories sent to this channel for years. Today I finally got the courage to share something that happened to me, and that I've never been able to explain. This happened around the year 2015. Back then, I was in high school, but when I was on vacation, I liked to work at a factory where they made shirts and blouses, mostly just to earn some money. It was in a municipality of Alto Tonga, Veracruz, about 10 minutes away by motorcycle from where I lived. And the thing is, I always got around by motorcycle. I went to work in the morning, came back home at lunchtime, and in the afternoon I went back to the factory. That was totally normal for me. One afternoon after coming back from lunch, there were problems with the city's power grid, and they decided to let the staff leave a couple of hours early. Instead of going straight home, I decided to stop by and see an ex-girlfriend who worked at a laundromat a few blocks away. We kept talking, and without realizing it, it got dark. Around 8:30, I decided to head back home, and I was driving calmly when, halfway through the trip, right on the road where there's a bridge that crosses a river, the road suddenly changed. A very thick fog appeared out of nowhere. It wasn't unusual for there to be fog in the area, but the strange thing was that it was only concentrated on that stretch of the road. Immediately, I felt something strange, like a wave of anxiety. I slowed down because you could barely see anything. And when I was crossing the bridge, the motorcycle started jerking, as if it was about to turn off, and the lights flickered several times. At that moment, I managed to see a figure sitting in the middle of the river. Even though it was sitting, it was huge, much bigger than a normal person. It was wearing some kind of dark robe and something like a very tall, pointed hat. I couldn't make out the face, just a silhouette, but it was completely out of place. Fear overwhelmed me. I sped up the motorcycle with all my strength, regardless of the poor visibility. I just wanted to get away from them. But no matter how much I accelerated, I felt as if something very heavy had jumped up and gotten on the motorcycle with me. The motorcycle struggled as if carrying extra weight and barely moving. My heart was beating so hard that I thought it was going to burst out of my chest. I started to pray. I started praying what little I remembered, trying not to lose control. In the back of my mind, there was a very clear idea. Don't turn around. Don't look in the mirrors. I kept going like that until after crossing the river, I reached an area where there were already houses with lights and lamps on. At that moment, the motorcycle felt light again and started moving normally. I kept praying until I got home. When I walked in, I felt like throwing up. I felt dizzy, my eyes were watery, and my body was shaking. My mom came out when she saw me, and I told her what happened. She went to get a cigarette, passed the smoke over my body, and told me to take a few drags, saying it helped get rid of bad energy, the kind that sometimes clings to you when you're out alone at night. I felt that. I threw up. It was dark, very unpleasant, and that's when I finally started to feel a little better. To this day, I don't know what I saw that night or what got on the motorcycle with me. The strange thing is that I haven't heard of anyone else experiencing something similar in that place either. The only thing I can tell you for sure is that nothing like that ever happened to me again, and I still travel that road every day at different times. And I haven't seen anything strange since. But one thing's for sure, every foggy night, it all comes back. All the memories. Everything from that night comes back to my mind with total clarity. That's why I hate it. Thank you for listening to me. Hello Uriel, and hello everyone. Please, if you decide to share this story, leave out my real name. You can just call me Alex. I've been listening to Relatos de la Noche for many years, pretty much since the channel started. However, for some reason, I had never brought myself to write. And not because I didn't want to, but because this story is still very painful for me. Every time I remember it, everything comes back. The dreams, the guilt, the fear, things I thought I had already left behind. I'm from San Miguel, El Salvador. When I was around 17 years old, I had 3 inseparable friends, Alberto, Juan, and Luis. We grew up together. We went to the same school. We hung out every day. We had the same tastes and the same interests. We were like brothers. Since we were 14 or 15 years old, we started getting more and more interested in rock music. And over time, we started moving toward darker things, like dark metal. And look, I don't blame the genre. I still listen to it even today, but we let ourselves get swept up in that rebellious, curious phase. Anything that had to do with the forbidden caught our attention. Abandoned houses, ghost stories, black magic. If someone told us that a place was haunted, that same night we would go in, just to check it out. One time, we went into a well-known abandoned estate in the neighborhood. It was said that it had been used by a very violent gang to commit atrocities. That night, as soon as we went in, we heard screams and whispers so real that we ran out without looking back. Time later, we found out that the authorities found bodies there. Anyone would think that would be enough to stop us, but it wasn't. On the contrary, the fact that we'd witnessed something paranormal pushed us to keep searching for more, to repeat the experience. That's why after that, I bought a Ouija board, and we used it all the time. It became something routine, and the person who sold it to me warned me about one thing. Don't ask it for anything you're not willing to pay for. We respected that rule. We never asked for favors or made wishes. We only asked questions. We only played. Or at least that's what we thought. A few years passed that way, until someone outside our circle told us that what we were doing was child's play. That if we wanted to experience something real, we had to do it in a cemetery. At midnight. That was the only way to take the game to that level. And of course, instead of scaring us, at that moment we felt those words almost like a challenge. And we thought of everything. We thought about special dates. Halloween, Holy Week. But in the end, we decided to do it on just any day. As soon as there was an opportunity. I don't remember the exact date. just that we were near the main cemetery, the main one in the city. And as always, I had the Ouija board in my backpack. So right there, out of nowhere, we thought it was the perfect moment, that it was the right time, the one we had been waiting for. Getting in was way too easy. We walked among the graves by the light of the moon, no flashlight, waiting for midnight. When the time came, we picked a random grave, and that's where we started. And at first, everything was normal until something suddenly changed. After a while of playing, I completely understand how what I'm saying is going to sound, but everything outside our circle became completely dark. It wasn't a lack of light, it was as if the darkness had closed in around us. At that moment, the planchette moved abruptly and stopped. So I asked, "Is there someone here with us?" Before I even finished the question, the pointer went straight to the yes. Then it started to spell out the following, letter by letter. "Thank you for visiting me." For some reason, it gave me goosebumps. The adrenaline I felt was incredible. I had never experienced anything like that before, not even close. So then I asked if it was the person who was buried in that grave, under the board. I said the name of the person who was there. The answer was no, and then he wrote, "I am. 5 graves. Right. And he gave a name. I said it was a lie. That name didn't sound familiar to me. And then he answered, "I don't lie." I went, confirm it. Alberto was about to remove his finger from the pointer, and someone shouted at him not to. I had read a lot about the Ouija board, and I knew that should never happen. After that, the board spelled out H-E-H-E-H-E-H. He was mocking. That's when I realized he wanted to make that happen. That one of us would break the circle. That's when we started to notice movement in the darkness, shadows, first around us, and then passing through us, moving between us. Fear overwhelmed us. We wanted to end the session. We asked several times if we could close, and it always answered, "No, until my friends ran out. I was the only one who kept my finger on the planchette, and it moved straight to goodbye. I left the board right there. I ran after my friends. However, I didn't catch up with them. I didn't see them anymore, and the only thing I had to do was run toward my house. And I went days without seeing them. We didn't see each other for days. That had never happened before. Nightmares started right away. I dreamed of my death in different ways, night after night. Wailing, shadows, attacks. I woke up screaming, soaked in sweat. No. I felt that finally we got together. We realized that we were all going through the same thing. Juan kept repeating it over and over again. I can't take it anymore. And we didn't know what to do. And to make matters worse, over time the nightmares got worse. They stopped being just dreams. One day I was riding my bike in broad daylight when I felt something go through me, and I went flying. And people helped me get up. They told me it looked like someone had pushed me, but there were no rocks or anything to explain the fall. That same day I went to the parish in my neighborhood. I told the priest everything, and he suggested I get baptized, since I hadn't been baptized up to that point. He organized it quickly, and the next day I was baptized. The nightmares stopped. I didn't have any more. But that wasn't the case for my friends. Alberto Siembra blamed me. He told his family that I had forced them, and from then on, they looked at me with hatred. Shortly after, they left the neighborhood, and I never heard from him again. Luis, it pains me to say it, but he took his own life. He left a note in which, among other things, he said he couldn't stand the shadows anymore. Juan gradually lost his mind. The last time I saw him, he was living on the streets shouting. Little by little, he became the crazy guy in the neighborhood and died years later. One morning, lying on the street, as if he had just fallen asleep. And I left that place. I never had those nightmares again, but I was never alone again either. Since death, there's a presence with me. I know it's there, even though I don't see it directly, only out of the corner of my eye. But it's always there. Sometimes I feel like it tenses up as if it's going to attack me, but it never does. It just scares me. I haven't told that to my wife. I'm afraid that if I do, something might happen to her or to my children. I know I'll live with this as long as God gives me life, and until that thing that's with me decides to collect whatever debt it thinks I owe. I just hope that's still a long way off. Thank you for reading my story, Uriel. Thank you for listening, everyone. Blessings. Thank you for making it halfway through this story. And stay tuned because the best is yet to come. We hope you're enjoying this episode, and from the bottom of our hearts, that this time of year is as peaceful as possible for all of you listening. We know that sometimes this season can make you feel even lonelier than you really are. But remember that we're here together, that this is a family, and we're going to be here. Especially for all those people who are going to spend Christmas Eve alone. We'll be here as part of this family, the family we chose, the Relatos de la Noche family. We continue with 2 more stories about spirits, about ghosts, about demons. We're going to Santiago, Chile. We continue. Hello, Uriel. I'm writing to you from Chile to share a family story that went unspoken for many years. What I'm going to tell you happened in 1979, the year my great-grandfather passed away. However, this event wasn't talked about openly until many years later, when those who witnessed it dared to tell the story. After the burial, the family returned home in 2 vehicles. In one were my grandfather, my mom, and 3 of my uncles. In the other was my great-grandmother, the wife of the deceased, along with my aunts and grandmothers. The first vehicle arrived several minutes earlier, and when it parked in front of the house, everyone began to hear crying. Cries that were clear and constant, as if from several people. They thought the other group had arrived first, that it must have been the daughters of the deceased who were crying over the loss. And the crying was very intense. They approached and knocked on the door, but no one answered, and inside they could hear the crying continuing. My grandfather and 2 of my uncles went around the house to look through the windows to see who was there. That's when they froze in fear. Inside the master bedroom, they saw several silhouettes, black shadows, kneeling around the bed, crying. They weren't defined figures or recognizable people. They were dark shadows with human shapes, bent over as if they were mourning. They went back to the door, thinking maybe it was some kind of mistake, that maybe my aunts or my great-grandmother were inside, that it was just a trick of the light making them look like shadows and not like people. They knocked on the door again. No one opened, and the crying continued. My mom also looked through one of the windows and saw exactly the same thing. At that time, there were no cell phones or any quick way to communicate, so all they could do was wait. And minutes later, the second vehicle finally arrived. My great-grandmother had the keys. They opened the door. The house was completely empty. There was no one inside, no crying, no movement. The bedroom was untouched. 5 people witnessed what happened. Everyone was deeply shocked. Out of respect for the moment because of the recent pain, and out of fear of causing more distress, they decided not to talk about the subject for a long time. Years later, my grandfather, a serious and skeptical man who wasn't prone to believing in these kinds of things, told the story. In front of my mom and my uncles, everyone confirmed that they had seen the same thing. The black shadows kneeling around the bed, crying, were never explained. They never found an explanation. Greetings from Chile community. I am the biggest fan of Relatos de la Noche, Che. Hello Oriol, good evening. Thank you for reading my story. My name is Ibis and I live in Guatemala City, in the El Gallito neighborhood. It happened in the early 90s when my family and I moved into a 2-story house. It was a big house, recently remodeled. Downstairs was the living room, the dining room, the kitchen, and the laundry area. Upstairs were the bedrooms and a bathroom at the end of the hallway. And about moving in, the previous owner warned us that there were problems with the laundry sink's plumbing. So my dad hired 2 construction workers to fix it. One of them stayed working alone while the other went out to buy materials, and that construction worker later said that while he was working, he heard the doorbell ring. He opened the door expecting his coworker, but no one was there. He smiled, thinking maybe it was a kid playing a prank, and that was it. But when he went back inside the house, he saw at the back the silhouette of a woman standing completely still. He thought it was my mom and called out to her. But as he got closer, he realized something that completely paralyzed him, that made him stop right then and there, unable to take another step. That figure standing still. That figure wasn't touching the ground. It looked as if it was hanging. He said his body felt heavy. He said very, very heavy, like lead, that he couldn't speak or move. At that moment, the doorbell rang again, and the silhouette began to fade. Yes, just like that, it simply faded away. He managed to open the door, and it was his partner coming back with the materials. He became worried when he saw him so pale and scared, and finally decided to tell him what he had seen. They finished the work as quickly as possible, and they didn't want to go back to the house. Not even on moving day. Everything was normal that day. Boxes, furniture, people coming and going with boxes. And that first night we slept peacefully. The next day, my mom noticed something strange with the dishes she had washed and left to dry. They were back in the sink, as if they had never been touched. She decided not to say anything. A few days later, my aunt came to help us with the move. One day, I went up to my sister's room to look for some tape, and as I went up the stairs coming down the hallway, I heard footsteps, delicate footsteps, like a woman's footsteps. She thought it was my mom and called out, but when she turned, no one was there. She ran downstairs scared and asked my mom not to tell us anything. As the weeks went by, the noises started. The furniture seemed to move on the second floor. When my mom was alone at home, she would hear the sound of dishes falling, even though nothing was out of place. One night, while my dad was working the night shift, my siblings and I decided to sleep in our parents' room and watch movies. Late into the night, we heard something. We clearly heard a woman going up the stairs. Volvía a subir, wearing high heels. The sound was unmistakable. The footsteps went up, down, and up again. Over and over again. No one dared to speak. We prayed until we fell asleep until morning came. But that happened again, for several nights. Months later, one afternoon I was left alone in the house. I was doing homework in my mom's room when I went downstairs to get something to eat. As I approached the stairs, I heard high heels coming from the laundry area. I heard them. I wanted to run, but I couldn't. My legs wouldn't respond. I managed to crawl up a few steps and I stayed there, unable to move or scream, and that's when I saw her. It was a woman dressed as a nurse. She was very pale with black eyes. She was holding something in her hand, something that looked like a container of alcohol, something, and she was looking at me. Oh. She came closer. She walked past me and kept going up the stairs. She passed by as if I didn't exist. I stayed there, crying until my mom arrived and found me. Time later, a friend of my brother came over to do some homework. When he came back from the bathroom, he asked very naturally, "Who is sick in the house?" He said he had seen a nurse in the living room. He asked who she was looking for. And that was what led my parents to investigate, to finally look into it. They told them that in the 70s, a young nurse named Catalina lived there, taking care of her mother who had terminal cancer. Catalina died during the 1976 earthquake. After the reconstruction, they started seeing her going up and down the stairs, always following exactly the same path. For that and other reasons, my parents finally sold the house. While we lived there, the noises never completely stopped. Sometimes, the only thing you could notice was a soft scent, like perfume. We never knew if Catalina was still taking care of someone, or if she simply didn't know there was no one left to care for, that she was alone. Hello community, I prefer to remain anonymous. You can call me Pita. I'm from León, Guanajuato, and I work in an area related to criminal law. What I'm about to tell you happened at my workplace, and it's something that still affects me to this day. I've been working there for about a year, and even though I had already heard strange comments about the building, nothing had ever happened to me until that day. About 2 weeks ago, I had to cover a shift on a Sunday morning. Normally those shifts are done from home, but that time they asked me to go in person to follow up on some urgent paperwork. I arrived early to organize everything. I got there, and unfortunately I was the only one who had to go up to the second floor, or at least that's what I thought. The building is big with long hallways. Everything echoes. Any step, any movement can be clearly heard because of the echo. You can hear everything. While I was looking for some files, I heard a laugh. It wasn't loud, but it was very clear. When I turned around, I saw the light in one of the offices turn on by itself. I thought maybe a guard had come up to look for me. That's what I thought. I walked over there, but before I got there, the light turned off. I told myself it was probably an electrical problem. I tried to convince myself of that with all my strength. I went back to my desk. I went back. There I have some collectible SpongeBob figurines, the kind that used to come in those que venían en las promociones. I always leave them arranged in the same way. Always. That had already seemed strange to me on other occasions. When I got to work, they would be out of place. I thought one of my co-workers had moved them. They were exactly the way I always arranged them. About 30 minutes went by. I got up to go to the kitchen to heat up my lunch while the oven was working. Meanwhile, I heard footsteps running down the hallway, as if someone was coming straight toward me. I turned off the oven and stood still, waiting for someone to speak or show up. The footsteps stopped. Then, I heard a voice, very close. A voice that said something like it wanted to play. A voice that asked me to lend it the dolls. It wasn't a child's voice. It was a deep, adult. My body froze. I felt a chill run down my back, and I got goosebumps. I tried to convince myself that I was just tired, that I had gotten up too early. I ran to the bathroom to splash water on my face and clear my head. When I got back to my desk, I got the first big shock of the day. My things were still there, but the dolls were gone. The chair had been dragged almost up against the wall. I thought it was a very bad joke. I went down to the first floor and asked the guard if she had come up. She told me no, that she couldn't leave her post, that she hadn't seen anyone go up except for me. Me and the person who was with me. I asked her which coworker she meant, and she replied that it was the man who came in with me, the one she had seen. I clearly told her that I had arrived alone. And the two of us fell silent. I went back to the second floor because I had no choice, because I had to work. I played some music to distract myself and kept working. I didn't want to get up from my chair, but there came a point when I had to go to the bathroom. The bathrooms are big, the kind where you can see underneath if someone is inside. When I went in, all the stalls were empty and I chose the first one. While I was there, I heard a soft laugh, and then I heard a voice telling me not to be scared, that it just wanted to play with me. It wasn't the guard's voice. It wasn't a human voice. It wasn't a normal voice. I was paralyzed. I remembered something my grandmother's always said, that you should never answer the dead or anything that doesn't belong to this world. I stayed silent, trembling. Suddenly, I saw one of my dolls fall to the floor of the stall. I screamed and called for help as I looked toward the next stall. I saw some feet. Yes, they were dark, and the toenails were long, way too long. I screamed again. Whatever was in there crouched down, picked up the doll, and started laughing. The laughter echoed in the bathroom, and then I smelled something burning. Strong, unbearable. I felt like I was going to faint. I don't know where I got the strength, but I opened the door and ran out. I didn't look back. I grabbed my things and went downstairs. The guard saw me looking pale and asked if I was okay. So I told him what had happened. She just told me something that made me feel even worse. Today it's your turn. But pray a lot so that it leaves you alone, so it doesn't go with you. She told me she already imagined what she could do. She said they had told her about a custodian who had died there years ago, before she arrived. That he died in a strange way, and since then sometimes bothered those who were left alone. That nobody really knew what he was looking for, but sometimes he would leave with someone and wouldn't be seen there for a while. That day I went home as soon as I got permission. Since then, whenever I go to work, my dolls appear one by one in different places in the building. I don't put them there anymore. I don't want anything to do with them now. And I'm also scared to go to the bathroom alone. I always ask a coworker to go with me. The security guard has told me that when she's downstairs, she hears someone running through the hallways on the second floor. She says that sometimes someone drags something, and she had never heard that before. I just hope I don't have to stay there alone again. I'd rather pay someone to cover my shift than have to face that again. Which apparently just wants to play. Even so, I'm going to try to avoid it.